I got trigger happy over here. So thank you guys all for attending. I know we're in the home stretch of content to conversion track, and then of course all in on B2B Marketing Exchange. I wanted to first ask the question, who attended Lee Odin's session yesterday on banishing boring B2B marketing? Okay, we got a few people in the room. He provided a great framework on influencer marketing, really got into the tactics, how-tos. For those of you who haven't seen it, I know he's going to be sharing it afterwards. I definitely encourage you to check out his presentation. I'm going to talk today about one influencer campaign program that I've been running at Fuse for the last 18 months, give you some history on why we chose influencer marketing, what were the goals we set, how we decided those goals, in addition to figuring out the right influencers for us. So that's where we're going. I did get a nice intro, but I always put these slides in. My name's Amanda Maximiou. As was mentioned, I'm responsible for all content and social at Fuse. The thing I want to point out, Fuse is around 700 employees. We have about 20 people on the marketing team, and we're split up into a few groups. I specifically sit on our brand and corporate marketing group, just to give you guys a little bit more color. I'm a team of one, so it's just me focused on content and social. I rely a ton on external help, whether it's freelancers, agencies, partners, so on and so forth. So I'll talk about how I was able to do all of this, because certainly it was more than just me. It was a really team effort that went into the program. So a little bit more about Fuse. As was mentioned, we're makers of communication software. And at our core, we push all of your communication channels into the cloud to make it really easy for IT to help manage all of those apps, whether it's calling, meeting, chatting, sharing, in one easy-to-use platform. Overall, our market is up behind me here. Primarily, we sell into enterprises. So our sweet spot is anywhere from 1,000 plus for the companies that we like to target and work with. My colleagues were actually here on Monday talking in depth about our target account program. So I'm not going to get into any details there, but just know we're really laser precision focused on the accounts that we want to do business with. On average, our sales cycle is anywhere between 6 and 12 months. So that helps kind of frame a little bit more with the influencer program I'm going to talk to you guys about. So when we think about the audience for Fuse, it's all about IT leaders. These are the folks that we care about, no matter what company they're in, if it's healthcare, high tech, retail, manufacturing. We found that a lot of their problems are the same for the companies that we target. And on one side, they have a ton of pressure coming from their business. They have pressure to cut costs. They have pressure to migrate to the cloud. If you're in a high-tech company yourself, you may think this is silly, but some of our customers don't even have their CRM in the cloud yet. So when we start presenting putting your communications in the cloud, it gets a little wonky, because their IT group has closets with PBXs and wires and SIP trunking. So there is a big leap that we have to get over when we talk about moving that stack to the cloud. And of course, there are security concerns that comes into play with this. And on the other side of things, there's this problem of shadow IT. It's really easy for all of us in this room to go and get a free instance of Slack, Zoom, enter any of your communication tools, right? And it's great for all of us to be able to do that, but it does cause some headaches for your IT coworkers. We try to make that a lot easier. I wanted to have this slide up so you guys get a better understanding of the competitive nature we're in. There are a ton of different providers that fall into this communication bucket. Some are direct pure play competitors to us, pulling everything all together into the cloud. But then there's also point solutions like Zoom or GoToMeeting, and traditional players like Avaya and Cisco. So when we were coming up with this campaign and program and our marketing strategy in general, we have to find that right kind of sweet spot to help stand out against all of these other competitors. Some who, quite frankly, are a little better known than Fuse. You guys may all use and love Slack and Zoom, so how do we stand out from the crowd in that regard? Okay, this is a fun one. When I joined Fuse about 3 years ago, to this day even with this program, I always get this from our sales reps. They want more case studies, and I totally get it. Customer case studies are gold to content marketers and salespeople and everyone in the organization. It makes so much more sense to have your customers tell your story than to have you tell your story. That's awesome. But if you work in an environment with IT leaders who are suspect and skeptical of marketing, and also in large enterprise companies, we ran into a huge problem to get our customers to do anything for us publicly. Yes, they would take reference calls, they would maybe speak for us at events, but as soon as I mentioned the words written case study or video, I just got blank stares. So I had to take a step back and figure out how we solve this problem, because I knew just telling our sales team, hey guys, it's not gonna happen this year, wasn't really gonna work. So that's where we came up with this program. And I'm going to be talking about the Game Changers program pretty much for the remainder of the track, and talk to you about why influencers worked for this customer case study problem, in addition to the other goals that we had set for ourselves. So our Game Changers campaign is a combination of a variety of different assets. It's had many shapes and forms across videos, written content, influencer engagement, and in-person events. And the reason it worked for us to help solve that customer case study problem is it was a much, much easier ask to go to your customer and say, hey, we're talking with IT leaders. We want to hear your story about digital transformation. I want to hear what you're doing in the retail space that's so cool, whether it's RFID technology or something along the lines of that, AR, VR, what have you. I never once asked them to talk about communications if they were our customer. That wasn't the goal for this. I wanted to get people comfortable and on our side to participate in the content. In addition to positioning it as an influencer program, we were able to also expand the horizon of people we could chat with this content. So that therein enters in the other influencers that we were able to recruit. So when you're thinking about any marketing strategy or any influencer program, it's really important to set goals. For influencer marketing in general, there are 5 top goals typically that come into play. And I just put the build up all behind me. I'll talk about them one by one now. You can use influencers to help increase your brand awareness, right? If you're tapping into someone who's extremely well known, think about how consumer-focused companies will pay influencers on social media. It's all about those eyeballs and the brand awareness. Obviously, I'm not encouraging that you guys go out and find an Instagram influencer. It's all about finding the right influencers for you to help achieve that goal on the B2B side. In the same regard, it's lead gen, right? If we are working with influencers to create really valuable content for our audience, you are able to put gates up over that content and get some nice lead gen flow for your sales team. On the sales acceleration side, I'm going to go into a fun story towards the bottom half of my presentation to show how we've actually used our Game Changer influencer program to really accelerate the sales cycle. And then, of course, it helps increase your awareness and traffic overall, especially if you tap into the various channels to activate influencers and get them sharing your content and your story. So a quick bit on identifying influencers. For this program, I focused a lot on what I call lowercase I influencers. And what I mean by that is I wasn't going after the traditional influencers you may think about being academics or industry consultants, authors, bloggers, so on and so forth. I went down a level and focused on IT leaders. And in order for them to be labeled influencers in my eyes, is they needed to have a good story. They needed to have some kind of brand value attached with them. Maybe they worked at a really interesting company, or there was some other cachet or sway around them. And in order to identify the influencers, I worked really closely with our demand gen team on the target account side to get a better understanding of who are the companies that we're going after. Could we potentially ask some prospects to participate in the content in doing this, just to give another way to broaden that. So when you're doing your research to identify influencers, I push people oftentimes to do both online and offline research. On the online side, Simply put, start with keyword research. Search online. Who's writing or blogging about your topic? Who's sharing content on social media? Also look to see where your competitors are getting coverage. This will help you build a quick roster, and there are also a ton of tools out there that you can use to identify influencers, whether they're traditionally on the social media side or even the lowercase influencers, as I'm talking about, if they have some kind of content stream where they're sharing. And then also on the offline side of things, by this I mean get out and talk to people. If you have the ability to talk to your customers directly, see where they go for information. And if you don't, ask your sales team too. It's a very simple question that you hopefully can work into your SDR or BDR script to just ask that simple question. Who are you influencers? Where do you go for information? So that was a super high crash course on goal setting and identifying influencers. The next chunk I want to really sink into what we did for our Game Changers program. So this is what the main content looks like. We created an online hub or an immersive landing page, which you see on the left side of the screen, has a ton of content. I know it's not optimized for demand gen, so please note that we did create demand gen friendly pages with one call to action really driving attention. But for this experience, it's all about time on site and engagement with the content. So you can see we have a video on there. There's also infographics. Part of the research report that we did with Game Changers and the interviews was build all of these individual stories. So going back to that main challenge I had from our sales team on getting more customer stories, remember that was one of the key kind of goals and drivers for us on the tactical side, is now we have 14 stories that are industry specific on our website that is talking about some kind of digital transformation in leadership. And it's been a really great way for our sales reps to start conversations, especially if they are looking to connect with someone at various industries. I do want to mention, for the most part, our entire marketing strategy is all horizontal. I don't create, even though we follow a target account strategy, we don't create any kind of verticalized or custom content. So this is my one attempt at doing that, because as you can see, we have, or you can't because it's small, I'll tell you, we have a variety of stories from retail, IT leaders, manufacturing IT leaders, high tech, and healthcare in here. So it's a great way to really offset what we're able to do on the content creation side with our customers. In addition to all of this content, we broke all of the stories down in individual pieces. They're all 4-page stories, and we kind of use this asset to help sell participation in the program. As you can see, we designed really nicely, highly visual. They almost look like magazines for each of the Game Changer stories. And the bottom part that I want to highlight is the focus on the IT leader. It kind of gives them something to be proud of. They have the profile in this document, and it helps build them up, which has been really exciting for some folks. In some cases, our customers, we even went ahead and got this printed nicely and framed, just as a nice thank you. So it's been a really great tool in that regard as well. In addition to all of that written content that we created and digital content that lives on our website, I wanted to extend this campaign to in-person events. I don't know if my company is similar to yours. We do about 100 field events a year, and that's just in the US alone. We do a ton. And I've been trying to work with our field managers to really up-level the events. You know, it's more just about taking people to dinner and taking people to basketball games. How do we tie in something else? And the thing that's worked really well, especially on the sporting side, is tying it to this Game Changers program. So you can see the bottom picture where the 3 gentlemen are standing in front of or sitting in front of the Game Changers banner. We actually did this outside of a suite at one of the basketball games that they were hosting a field event at. We asked people to arrive an hour early before the game, and we had a nice Q&A with our influencers that were featured in that written report. So it's been a really great way to extend the life of that campaign in other formats, in-person events, make it a little bit more interesting for people. And then, you know, hopefully everyone takes something away, not just the fun time that they had at the game. To date, we've done about 7 of these events globally, the majority of them in the US, but we have had some in London and Milan. And it's been wildly successful for us in order to continue recruiting more game changer influencers to participate with us, in addition to creating more content. Because every one of these events, we get more stories. Those are blog posts, those are social media posts, they're videos if we get permission to be able to film. So it's been a real win in turning up our content creation engine. This next slide is the importance of activation with any of your programs, whether it is just a normal ebook or white paper or influencer-fueled content, right? It's so important to get out there and make sure we're actually marketing the content that we're creating. And I labeled this as digital advertising. All of these ads or social cards have either been pushed out on organic social channels. We shared them with all of the influencers who participated in the campaign to give them an easy way to post and talk about the content on social media, in addition to having traditional digital ads on our content syndication programs. All of that has been really, really important in ensuring we hit our view goals and lead gen goals around the content, just making sure we're constantly pushing it out there. The one in the middle with the red face, this is kind of a prototype. We're in the works on getting approval from a couple of our customers to build ad campaigns out around this. So you could imagine the digital transformation of National Geographic and have some kind of really stylized ad or picture to go around that. And that kind of, for me, hits a couple key things. We're capitalizing on that company's brand name, in addition to getting out that they're actually a customer of ours, even though we're not necessarily sharing their customer case study story. So that's been something that we're still kind of playing around with. All right, taking a step back to tactics a little bit. You guys just saw a ton of content that we created for the Game Changers influencer program. And obviously with that, we focused on primarily written content, video content, but there's a ton of content you guys can create with influencers. And if you're just getting started, it solely makes sense to ask for the small things. It's so important to build that relationship up with influencers, so you don't want to go in, hey, love your content, can you do a 4-part video series with me and hit the road because I'm doing a bunch of events and we need a speaker. Unless you're going to pay them, that's not going to fly. Also, if you're anything like me, you don't have an endless budget, so you need to get crafty. So I would suggest starting on the smaller side of things, whether it's a quote for a longer piece of content, potentially sending them 2 or 3 questions to answer in an email, and you could then include that in a recap blog post or develop some other broader Q&A around it. So ton of things that you could do, all kind of leveling on where you're at with the relationship in terms of really getting people excited to partner with you. Sorry, my 0 is hanging there, some weird formatting. All right, I wanted to get in the weeds of how we made this all possible and also get super transparent on cost and how much time it took. Overall, it was around 4 to 6 months. The bulk of that time probably was on recruiting influencers, getting the interviews to happen, in addition to the content kind of all written up and then approved. I didn't do this alone. I mentioned we use a variety of third-party help. In order to make this happen, I worked with the folks at Content for Demand and then also our own PR agency. Our PR agency owned all of the customer content, and I worked with Content for Demand to recruit the external non-customer influencers. Beyond that, the rest of the timeline was eaten up by design and creation to really get those campaigns out. From a budget perspective, between those 2 agencies and any kind of freelancer we had on the video support, it was around a $40,000 investment. We do have our own internal design team, so that cost wasn't in there. And there's just no way for us to easily figure out how they would back charge me. So that's the only other asterisk there. Okay, I want to take another step back and tell you guys this really fun story about how this campaign has been evolving, because it's something that I didn't dream of when we started. When I initially proposed the idea of this Game Changer program and tying into influencers, it was honestly all about just getting more customer content, simply put. And I wanted to be able to kind of get the sales team off my back a little bit and, okay, now you guys have stories, great, go, and we'll figure out how it works. And our field team in France actually had this idea, so I give them a ton of credit, to really use this Game Changer program as a sales enablement tool or a sales tool to really help accelerate key deals for us. So I mentioned it was our team in France. Forgive the slide in French, but I'll walk you guys through it because I know in the back row you may not be able to read all the smaller font here. Basically, they positioned to one of their biggest deals in Q4 that if you partner with Fuze, you can become a game changer. I never thought of making those connections. I didn't want it to be an overly sales tool, but it ultimately ended up working. Positioning and keying in on their own desires to become more influential or more well-known in the space worked really well for us. It worked really well because the CIO in this case was kind of ego-driven. So it's important to understand your personas for this. This may not work for everybody. But she ultimately created this communication plan and said, if you partner with us, we're going to do all these things to help you up-level your career. You're a CIO now at a great company in France. It's really well known, but imagine what you can become. Imagine the influencer you can become. So in this communication plan, they laid out different media interviews that they would target, different press releases, and advertisements. And then we went as far as actually mocking up what their Game Changer article could look like. We had already sent them the full report so they could see and read the content. But now, Mr. CIO, don't you want to do this? Don't you want to have the story of your own documented? Wouldn't that be fantastic? And oh, by the way, we would love to advertise with you about this. And they bought it. We actually had 2 deals that we did this for that closed in Q4, ultimately totaling over almost $2.5 million in ARR, which has really been fantastic. But that's not it. The other great results that we've had is that we have that new influx of customer stories, which is a huge win for me. It's become one of the top downloads on Fuze and in our content syndication programs. To date, over 1,000 downloads. That may or may not sound like a lot, but for us, that is a lot. We have sometimes a hard time getting our audience to download these longer form content pieces, so that was a real win for us. And all of those downloads influenced more than $1.5 million in ARR. Some quick math, $5 million in ARR, $40,000 investment, it's still growing. This is something that I'm definitely proud of at the company for sure. So before I switch over to you guys for questions, I just wanted to highlight these 2 quick key takeaways because it's something that you don't necessarily always think about, number one, with influencers. Don't forget about those lowercase I influencers or those smaller scale, much more attainable folks. It's a great way to help offset and create more content to potentially get in and use as a sales enablement or sales acceleration tool, warm up a prospect at key accounts, in addition to getting those relationships started so you don't feel like it's a huge uphill battle. And then this last thing I'm really pushing is around integrating this content idea and influencers into field events, if it's something that you guys do. If not, it could also be integrated into any other webinars or other event-based things that you guys are focused on. So I think we have about 5 minutes or so left. Would love to hear questions. Yeah.
Same situation as you, tech company, hard to get them to be named. So how did you get approvals from them for this?
It really was all about the easy ask where I never even said case study. I basically approached, on our customer side, I approached them saying, we're working on this new thought leadership piece, that was one buzzword, to showcase stories from IT leaders about digital transformation. We'd love to feature you, whether you're, again, and I kind of did some research on the account where I knew what that hook was, or I could figure it out based on the industry they were in. And I don't want to say that totally bypassed and they didn't have to go through corporate comms, but I think if you do something that isn't labeled as a case study testimonial, it is an easier ask for those IT leaders. So we never had any issue getting approval. Obviously, some people said, no, we can't do it, but once they got going, things were approved really easily. Yeah.
Do you have any pushback from your sellers who are relationship managers?
Yeah. Or like, no, I want to manage it totally. I don't want you reaching out to my customer. I'll repeat the question just in case everyone can't hear it. Did we get any pushback from our sellers in terms of making that outreach? You know, would they tell any bad stories? Not really. I think for the in-person live events, it always gets a little dicey, right? You want to make sure like the account's happy, everything is good and healthy, things are working. But in terms of the stories, we didn't get any pushback because I did a lot of work to educate the sales team on what this was and what it wasn't. So it's all about that thought leadership story and play. So more often than not, the sales reps who got it ultimately would provide me with customers for me to go target. Like this would be a great person because. So I think just explaining the value to them has really helped. Sure.
How do you keep this program refreshed over time? Do you have new things coming on and sunset some?
Yeah, so the question is how do we keep this refreshed and lively? So it's already been about 18 months. And initially I had the goal of quantity just because we needed to have stories to tell. I wanted it to be something kind of substantial. When the print piece is, I think like 64 pages because they're 4 each. So it's a beast. Now I'm focused on higher end, higher value, well-known brands. So to get totally transparent, one of my compensated goals this year is to get 2 more game changer stories. That's vastly different from the initial 14 or 12 that I had targeted when we got this started. In terms of the events, since we've been getting such good response over those and we have really nice professional photos of the events, it's been easy to get customers to participate in that as kind of a quick win. You know, they're often tied around something else good, whether it's promise of a good steak dinner or a basketball game. So that's kind of been that kind of balance and juggle. Yeah. Yep.
The bandwidth needed to create. I mean, it looks great. Like I really like how it looks. I'm sure it's taking a lot of time and resources to get all this.
Yeah. So from a bandwidth perspective, in general, I focus on 2 to 3 big rock pieces of content for a year, or big campaigns, whatever phrase you want to use. So it definitely takes a ton of my time. Even though I'm not doing all of the writing and interviewing, it takes time to manage the different agency partners and things. So I think it just depends like what your marketing strategy is. You know, for us on the thought leadership side, it typically is 2 to 3 big things a year. So I can kind of really focus for those 4 to 6 months on getting this done and launched and created. Definitely not. I wish it was. I wish it could be the one thing that we were working on, but it doesn't work like that. Oftentimes, we want these things to launch kind of similarly. So it could, and usually in the beginning of the year, just so we can have a long shelf life of them, right? So oftentimes, I am juggling probably those 2 to 3 big projects at once, and it's just about finding that right time and balance. And for me, agency partners, because it's being a team of one. I think the music and the lights are going to come on here.
Yeah, well, you know, the reason there's so many questions, people were keen, everybody's rapt attention is because it's a practical and useful and executable piece of peer education. So amazing, well done. I think you're a game changer. I think your campaign's a game changer. I think Fuse is done super well. You can review this session, and I think you should give it top marks. So make sure you click on the session box and then click on the survey side itself. You know, the insights that your customers have problems that are similar with each other, and you can get those customers to tell your story more effectively by thinking creatively is really practical and useful. So super well done.